Okay, I built this Hellcat in under 10 weeks and it cost me $808 in materials. So I'm going to explain how I did that. Also, the Hellcat and the Stug have a lot of similarities. So I kind of compared the costs in hours and dollars and some lessons learned. The track and suspension designs are very similar. Hull, of course, is similar construction, 1/4-inch plywood. The guns are very similar design. The main difference is the Hellcat is gas powered with a lawnmower engine and 2 snowblower gearboxes. The Stug is electric, and so there's some interesting things I learned in terms of cost and time to construct it when comparing these two things. So let's get into it. So here's my build log. You can see I started on April 25th with disassembling the snowblowers. And then every time I worked on it, I wrote down how many hours and what I did. And I got to July 3rd was when I first test drove it. So that adds up to just under 10 weeks of total duration. And my totals here is wrong. It was 170.5. I had added one wrong there, but 170.5 hours. That's real similar to what it was for the Stug. I think the Stug took me about 160 hours, but I spread that out over 6 months. The Hellcat, I compressed it into 10 weeks to hit my July 4th deadline. So I had worked on it about, I don't know, 8 to 12 hours every Saturday, and then an hour here and there where I could spare. So same amount of labor into both tanks, but just compressed it really to get the Hellcat done by July 4th. The drivetrain is by far the most expensive in terms of dollars and hours part of the design. So I did this quick and cheap by fabricating as little as possible. The drivetrain on the Stug actually took less time. These are the motors out of a mobility scooter. That's the control box. And the only thing I had to fabricate was these 2 gearboxes. It didn't quite have enough torque to turn, so I made these 2-to-1 reduction gearboxes to make that all work. On the Hellcat, it's a lawnmower engine and a snowblower gearbox for each track. I did have to do quite a bit of fabrication, but that limited it a lot compared to some other tank builds I've seen where people are trying to fabricate forward and reverse drive systems. The next biggest thing for other tank builds I've seen is the tracks, but it was the 3rd biggest component because of the track design I came up with. Using these belts, this has 1 belt, that's 3, so I've got a gap for my drive sprocket, but conveyor belt, 1/8 inch thick, I think, conveyor belt, and these plastic track links cut from landscaping timber, plastic landscaping timber. It saves a ton of time. It works great. I've got quite a bit of driving on both of these, and you can see they're durable. They're holding up really well. So the track design I came up with is a huge time saver. The next one is the suspension. I kept the suspension as simple as possible by going with a torsion bar tank. You know, as opposed to like a Sherman, there's a lot of stuff you'd have to make it look right. And here it's just a metal, single metal bracket, and then a spring from, you can see right there, from a porch swing suspension kit. So I think those were $7 for a pair of springs, and they were just great for both of these tanks. And just making it adjustable so that I could get the right amount of spring rate. So you can watch my suspension videos to see how I did that. But the suspension arm itself is steel, but the rest of it, how it's mounted in the hull, is just wood. Just drilled a hole through a 2x3, I think, on the Hellcat, and I think it's just 2x2s on the Stug. So just keeping the suspension as simple as possible saved me a lot of time and cost. Also, the suspension, there's no bearings in any of these wheels. These are just plastic wheels with a plain hole in the center with grease. I mean, each wheel is only supporting about 25 pounds maybe, so there's not a lot of weight there. They don't go super fast, certainly not the Stug. So ball bearings, at this point anyway, these plastic wheels with a plain bearing has worked just fine. So here is the cost breakdown. So the drivetrain for the Hellcat, I said in one of my videos it was $100. It ended up being $324 after I bought the pulleys, the belt, the brakes, and some steel to mount it all in there. So $324, still less than the $401 for the Stug, but that $401 does not include the mobility scooter. So if I had to buy a mobility scooter, that would have added several $100s to the cost of the Stug drivetrain. The suspension came out at 196, but I had the 3/4 inch steel bar on hand, so I didn't have to buy any of that. That's mostly the cost of the wheels. So they would have worked out about the same as the Stug if I had to buy all the steel for the suspension. The hull, same story. I had a lot of leftover wood and screws and staples and that sort of thing. So I only spent $80 on the hull, another $22 on the turret. So the wood was shared between the hull and the turret. The $22 was for the turret rollers. But you can see it shows a lot less for the Hellcat. It would have been about the same if I had done the Hellcat first and had to buy that material up front. The turret, though, you can see in terms of hours, they were very close, 34 hours for the Hellcat hull and 30 for the Stug hull. But I also had to build a turret, which was an additional 28 hours. So adding that turret added a tremendous amount of hours to the build versus a Stug with no turret. Paint was very similar for both. Except I spent a lot more time on the Stug, obviously, because I did the camouflage and I hand painted the cross and numbers, versus the Hellcat, I bought decals to stick on there. The guns were both very similar. A little more cost for the Stug because I had a separate compressor and controller, did some trial and error to get a system that worked well there. The Hellcat, I have a compressor all-in-one mounted on the gun that's got a battery, compressor, and control built in. So that was I think ended up being a better way to go. The track, again, same story. It would have cost about the same as the Stug, but I had bought the belt and some leftover material, so I only spent an additional $36 to build the Hellcat track. Hours were about the same, only 14 hours to build the track. So because of that track design, it's pretty simple. And then the Stug had cameras and an electrical system, which I didn't have at all on the Hellcat, so that was just an additional money and time savings to not do those things on the Hellcat. So there's the breakdown. Like I said, I spent $808, but I had a lot of leftover materials. It might have been closer to $900 if I had to buy all that stuff. But that's how I did it. Now the Hellcat's not done. I rushed to get it done for July 4th, and it was drivable, but the only way to stop it is to kill the engine. So I got a kill switch right here. That was from the original lawnmower. And then you've got, it's kind of dark in there, it's hard to see, but there's a steering lever here for the left track, another one over here for the right track. So you can steer it, but then when you need to stop, you gotta just kill the engine. I didn't have time to build the clutch and brake controls, so that's my next step to do that. I'm in no hurry because I don't have an event planned for it, so it might be a while before I get to that, but that's the next step. Clutch and brake controls for the driver. The other thing I've got to do is get rid of this. You can't even see it from this angle. There we go. This is the arm for the tensioner, and there's a spring behind that keeps tension. But that ends up not working very well because in forward it's fine, but when you go in reverse, it compresses that spring. Sometimes these two wheels collide and it creates a lot of slack just below the drive sprocket when you turn, because this track, the tension is in the opposite direction when you're turning. So I'm gonna get rid of that spring and put an adjustable rigid mount for adjusting the track tension. So those are the two must-dos. Beyond that, I'd like to have a turret lock. You notice when it turns so smooth that when the tank turns, the turret wants to keep pointing where it was, and your driver, you got both your hands on the steering control, so you can't hold the turret. So it looks kind of funny. You make a left turn and the turret's rotating to the right. So I'd like to make some sort of turret lock. And what I'm thinking is the right handle here has the trigger to fire the gun. On the left one, I'd like to put a button so that when you squeeze it, it releases the turret and allows you to turn it. And when you let go, it locks it in place so that you can grab the steering controls. Another thing I'd like to do is reroute the exhaust. Here's the muffler exhaust comes out here, and it directs kind of into the this left gearbox quite a bit. There's nothing immediately on the other side that it's going to overheat or anything, but it'd be nice to have a pipe that came up and to somewhere over here to direct it through this wire mesh. So I'd like to do that. I'd like to get an electric start motor too, so maybe I'll keep an eye out for a motor. The problem there is it's going to be a bigger motor made for a riding lawnmower, so I'm going to have a hard time getting it to fit. I might have to cut out that firewall and move it forward a little bit to make room for a bigger motor, but that might do that someday, but I'm in no hurry. It's got enough power to go 6-7 miles an hour right now, so it's a lot of fun. And some other cosmetic things I like to do. The Hellcat has there's like a steel tube basket for stowage on the side of the turret, and a bin here that fits kind of like a jerry can. So that's on both sides. And on this side, there's a part that bumps out right here for a ring mount for a 50 cal machine gun. So I'd like to add that, and the 50 cal, a dummy 50 cal, that's the right scale. Lights on the front would be fun. And the hatches for the driver and co-driver right here. I got a place for, there's a beam here at this corner, and then there's another beam about here to support the front of the turret. So I do have room there to cut out a hatch for the driver and co-driver. It might make it easier to get in there for maintenance as well. Tow cable, pioneering tools, of course, unit numbers, that sort of thing I'd like to add someday. I'm not sure when I'll get to that, but just to give it a little bit more authentic look, add some detail. Oh, of course, the muzzle brake. I never built the muzzle brake. That one on the Stug turned out great. I need to do something similar for the Hellcat. Okay, the tools involved are, I've got a welder and a plasma cutter. Of course, an angle grinder. Any metal work you do, you're going to need an angle grinder. And there's my 20-ton shop press. I could have done without that, but it was helpful to do the drive sprockets on the Stug. Other tools, I had a table saw right here that I borrowed from my father-in-law. I returned that yesterday, so I don't have that anymore. But basic drill press. This is a hand-operated belt sander that I made into a jig to use as a belt, bench-mounted belt sander, bench grinder. That's a metal chop saw, miter saw, radial saw, and then I got one of those vibratory or oscillating tools for making end cuts. That was helpful. I wish I would have bought that sooner for the Stug. Of course, an angle grinder, and there's a battery operated jigsaw. So that kind of rounds out all the tools I needed. Nothing super complicated. I don't have a router or a milling table or lathe or anything like that. Just some probably more than most people have in terms of tools, but nothing too expensive or complicated. So there you have it. Now, the next video I post is going to be after I get the clutch and brake installed. I want to do some off-road trials with the Hellcat, see what it can do in terms of hill climbs and obstacles and off-road performance. So that's going to be a lot of fun, but it might be a few months before I get to that. So stay tuned, and I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for watching.